Get better plans. Retirement savings plans will now be available to more Americans than ever before. And I want to just say one thing. You know, we just made a great deal for both countries with Mexico. Big thing, big thing. NAFTA was a disaster, and we've changed it around. We're not going to have companies leaving anymore. We're not going to have people losing their jobs because these great companies are leaving for other lands, and in certain cases, Mexico. Mexico's got some tremendous advantages also. It's good for both. And I just have to say, because it is funny, I just said, because, you know the way I feel. I gave an interview yesterday to Bloomberg Business. And I said, off the record, and I made a statement about Canada, which is fine, because I love Canada. But they've taken advantage of our country for many years. They have tremendous trade barriers, and they have tremendous tariffs. Dairy products are, do you know this, Mark? Almost 300% tariff. Nobody talks about that. Nobody says that. They say, oh, Canada, we love Canada. I do, too. I even love their national anthem. It's called, very appropriately, O Canada. Would you like me to sing it? But they have taken advantage of us, as has virtually every country in the world. In fact, when they haven't, I say, what's wrong with you? But I can't find any, so I haven't been able to say that yet. But I gave a totally off the record, you saw it. It said, off the record. And I said something strong, but it's my belief. And they violated it. And they said they were violating it. It's unbelievable what's happening with the fake news. It's unbelievable. When you say off the record, it's not a legal term, but it's a term of honor. So when I say off the record, here's the story, in order really to save time. I don't want to waste a lot of time. And then they actually printed my off the record. They said, President Trump said off the record, and then they go on to this. I said, this is a first. These are very dishonorable people. But I said, in the end, it's okay, because at least Canada knows how I feel. So it's fine. It's fine. It's true. Just happened. Just happened as I came off the plane. I said, that's impossible to do. No, they didn't do that. They would have been better off if they left the off the record. And usually what they do is they will leave the off the record and then say, oh, I thought it was on the record.
This is a very complex agreement, and we are going to continue working at it. We know that a win-win-win agreement is within reach. The government of Canada will not sign an agreement unless it's good for Canada and good for Canadians.
This is quite something today. It affected the markets. It affected this negotiating. The Toronto Star had a quote from the president. Here's the problem. If I say no, the answer is no. If I say no, then you're going to put that out, and it's going to be so insulting, they're not going to be able to make a deal. I can't kill these people. He goes on to say it's all off the record. They came knocking, Canada did, and let's make a deal, they said. He tweeted out, wow, I made off-the-record comments to Bloomberg concerning Canada, and this powerful understanding was blatantly violated. Oh, well, just more dishonest reporting. I'm used to it. At least Canada knows where I stand. With that, let's bring in our panel. David Catanese, senior writer for U.S. News and World Report. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, and Washington Post columnist Mark Thiessen. Mark, quite something. Obviously, the president said, oh, well, Canada knows now, but it did affect the negotiations today.
It certainly did, and Canada definitely knows how he feels, and quite frankly, the whole world knows how he feels when it comes to trade. I think what Donald Trump is doing here in all of these negotiations is he's been accused of being a protectionist. What he's doing is he's using tariffs as a tool to pursue a radical free trade agenda. At the G7 summit, he proposed in that meeting, all tariffs gone, all trade barriers gone, and everybody said no. And they all said, we're not going to negotiate with a gun to our heads. Well, guess what? Front page of the New York Times today. This is from the failing New York Times. President Trump's threat to impose tariffs on imported cars is working, sending foreign leaders from Mexico to Japan racing to the negotiating table to make deals. The European Union just agreed to go to zero tariffs on automobiles because what he did was he threatened tariffs. He imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum and said, guess what? I'm going to do it on cars too. and they believed it was a credible threat because he had done it on steel and aluminum. So he is using these tariffs as a tool to tear down trade barriers with our trading partners.
I mean, it seems to have worked with Mexico to get them to the table and to sign on to what he wanted. It was an interesting media story, too, Molly.
Yeah,
Bloomberg saying that they didn't do it.
President Trump is right that it's not a legal term, but when you agree that someone is speaking off the record to you, you do protect that. That's a very important thing to protect. It's an issue of trust and how you feel like the relationship is with a media outlet. They claim that they didn't violate that, although there's not a good explanation for how these comments and direct quotes got leaked to the Toronto Star.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting about the larger media story. As Mark points out, we were being told that President Trump loves tariffs and loves nothing more than killing free trade agreements, when in fact what it looks like he was doing is what he said he was doing all along, which is applying a stick to negotiate better deals. NAFTA is a 25-year-old deal. Whether you love it or hate it, there's no question that the economy has changed quite a bit in 25 years. And the proof is in the pudding. The EU Trade Commissioner says they'd be willing to have zero tariffs if we do zero tariffs. That's very much in line with what President Trump had said he wanted. Lower tariffs, lower barriers, lower problems that limit free trade. So I think a lot of people just weren't covering this story accurately at all.
Dave, how does this play politically? The president is saying, listen, we're getting taken advantage of, and he goes to these places like Indiana and Iowa and all these places in the Midwest and says, listen, you might feel the pinch for a while, but we're going to win this thing. And is he winning it in the eyes of people in the middle of the country?
He has a partial victory right now. The reason I say it's a partial victory is because, first of all, a lot of people didn't think he was able to get this far. And Mexico's come to the table, and it looks like the sticks are working. The caveat that I would put on this is that Congress has to approve anything that is agreed to, and they get a 90-day window. We're now within 70 days of an election that is probably you're going to have a Democratic House in 70 days. Now, why would a Democratic House go along with any type of trade agreement that Donald Trump has? So I think we're dealing, I mean, look, Trump could get this agreement with Canada and Mexico, but if he's dealing with a Speaker Nancy Pelosi in 3 months to try to ratify it, that is and a very closely divided Senate. And remember, there are Republicans that are against a lot of what's going on here. Ben Sasse, you might lose Republican senators for some of the details in these trade agreements.
Right, but you could gain some Democrats like Sherrod Brown in Ohio and others. Quickly, Lighthizer, the U.S. trade rep, was on this show and said, really, this all has to do with China.
Well, sure, because China, and this is you have to separate out the arguments between Europe and Canada and Mexico and China. China is violating our intellectual property. I mean, it's one of the biggest thefts of intellectual property in human history. There are legitimate issues. So even people who have been critical of what the president was doing when it comes to the EU, when it comes to our trading partners and our allies, should be backing him when it comes to China.